Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. We're here today with Mesa County Compass, and we are having an interview with actually the owner of Rockslide downtown on 4th and Main. We have Trout, Kirch, and we have his friend,
General manager.
Yeah. Friend and general manager. We'll put it both ways, okay?
He's the important
Brian
one
Oliver.
here. Yeah.
Welcome, you guys. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
And what I'd like for you to do is begin out, Trout. Give us a little bit about your background, what you're all about, and why you got into the restaurant business, and why then, Brian, are you the general manager for Trout? Okay. How'd you guys get together? Type thing.
It's actually kind of an easy one. I mean, I could go back and I could tell you I was born at a young age and all of that. But
I love it.
I don't necessarily have to go back that far, but long story short, I got out of high school. I went into the service. I was told you'll never amount to anything until you go to college. So I didn't go to college. I spent 13 years in the service, and when I got out, I happened to find myself in the insurance industry. And I've got an agency that I built up since 2005 here in Junction. And I have no business whatsoever being in the restaurant business and brewery business, but our accountant had mentioned, you should look at maybe some diversifying. The insurance market, it goes soft, it goes hard. Just having, some other, diversity there wouldn't be a bad thing. And so
right.
Look at businesses for sale, and happened to see restaurant for sale a couple years ago. And I thought it was actually a different one at first. And it kind of accidentally happened. Again, I don't know much about that industry. I've learned a lot, but I still run the insurance side. And so one of the stipulations on this, just kind of seeing what would happen if we threw in our hat to see if we could make it happen, was that we don't want to really change much of anything. We want to keep the staff in and what's working. And I've looked at a ton of different businesses, ton of different restaurants, insurance agencies. I've got a background in that and entrepreneurship. I know which ones are failing and which ones aren't, and this one was being run very well. So it was very attractive. And again, one of the stipulations is we got to have a conversation with the staff to make sure that they're interested in continuing down that path. And the general, if you will, was Brian, and that's how I got hooked up with Brian.
Okay.
And
so that came together real nice.
Oh, yeah. We had seen him in the restaurant, and I was always very impressed. As a customer, I always thought he was just maybe one of the floor managers or maybe like a server manager or something. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that he ran the entire operation, because he's right there and he's at the table and shaking hands and smiling.
Always important.
And so very, very impressed long before I had ever met him.
Very good, very good. Let's have a shameless plug real quick for your insurance agency.
Rocky Mountain West Insurance.
There you go.
Okay, good.
So we're in all 50 states. I've got almost 50 employees and based right here out of Grand Junction.
So you do all kinds of insurance?
All kinds of insurance, wholesale, retail, commercial, personal.
Excellent.
The whole thing. I was going to wear my, I'm Jake from Snake Farm. Great. But I figure, I don't want to offend anybody. So. But no, so that's where we're at.
Okay, very good.
So Brian, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I grew up in the area. Moab for a really short amount of time. Then I came to Grand Junction for school. I went to middle school, high school, and college here in town. I was a general manager of SkyWest Airlines for 14 and a half years-ish.
All right.
was my first career, and I became a single father of 3 daughters.
Hmm.
So changing industries was beneficial for me, and timing and so on and so forth.
Right.
And so I've been in restaurants for 35 years.
Oh my goodness! So
gosh.
you well know the business
Yeah.
then.
This will be, I believe, my 9th restaurant, including some training stores and those kind of things over those years.
Very good.
But this last 11 years have been just amazing.
And Rockslide is quite a popular restaurant.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And it's
is.
been open for 30 years,
Uh-huh.
which is amazing in itself. And we hopefully keep evolving with the city and the menu so it stays fresh and interesting and not the same old hat.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Good.
it is good. I've had several of my nieces and nephews serve with you, so as waitresses and waiters and whatnot.
All right, what were their names? No.
Molly Wilson.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. She
Jeez.
was. Yep.
Yeah, I've over 35 years. I can't even fathom to how many employees I've worked with.
You
over
have
those-
mentored a bunch of kids, people.
It's amazing, and it's really nice when people succeed later in their life and they come
Right.
back and say, "God, I really like working with you," and that's that's really
Well,
does it
and you
for
can
me.
set an example for them to shoot for.
Well, I'll try to. I mean,
Exactly.
So the business has been going really well, and then last year happened. So what did you guys know about changes that were happening in the city? And, you know, I know that you've probably one of the few that said, this isn't really working very well for us in terms of parking and in terms of, you know, people wanting to come downtown and those sort of things. So how much did you know that was going to happen? And you're right in the middle of all of the changes.
It's actually a really good question. My agency's up on Grand, and so, you know, nothing against downtown or downtown businesses, but it's not my backyard, and so I didn't, pay as much attention because I'm on Grand Avenue. That's not going to change, dramatically.
Well, not right now.
No, well, not right now. And so, in the genesis of all of these changes and everything, I wasn't really, involved even mentally with that, disengaged, if you will. When we sought to buy Rockslide and go down that road, it still didn't even really present as a thing. And I know I had a conversation with Brian early on. And it was, there's some changes coming with the parking, and it was still a very, almost a favorable, we were led to believe it would be better kind of thing. And so I didn't think anything of it, and we proceeded with buying it. And so I was fairly disengaged from, the planning and ideas of what was going to happen downtown. I can give you a bunch of opinions afterwards, but I think it's important, kind of how, because you were there the whole time.
Sure, I was part of the downtown leadership committee when they were proposing in their ideas of what options, and they asked for our input, and we gave it to them. I think the original plan was to slow down traffic, which made sense. Coming off the hill of Fifth Street or going down, it's people were coming through at a higher pace, so I completely understand that. And they had a couple options. One of them was make the streets 2 ways on 4th and 5th. As it gone through the DOT and the city group, the plan had changed and morphed as everybody puts in their 2 cents. So as that happens, just like everything else, the pendulum swings from one extreme to another. We, as a society, have a tendency to let it blow all the way across instead of work its way down to the median point, which would make everyone happy. So as all those changes came into effect, parking became an issue, bike lanes became an issue, and those were all set up by concerns from the city council or the Department of Transportation. So the original idea of being able to slow it down, again, went to the far extreme. We had an opportunity to make it one lane, which was fine, and increase parking, which was fine. And you could also slow it down by speed limits, which seemed to me to be a very cheap way to make everything happen. But there's I believe some city council members that are really driving the bike, and having a bike lane on every street seems to be a little bit excessive for the game plan moving down. Grand Junction is still a retirement community in my mind, as although it's growing for the school and other businesses that are coming in the area. But it doesn't mean that we forget part of our society. So if you're going to a mobility-friendly environment, you need to include everyone else that has mobility struggles, and how to get them down and how to make it easier and those kind of things. So my perception is that so many hands got involved in the planning that it kind of lost its way. And instead of really reevaluating, they just put it in motion and then called it a pilot program. Now the pilot program has changed, and my concern is at what cost? If instead of planning all the way through and working through the systems, we've repainted, redone, it's for me become a little bit of a waste of our taxpayer dollars instead of working through the problem a little bit more. And I get it, there's input from many different governing factions to make all this come together. So I just believe that what was presented got changed so much that it didn't do what we wanted it to do at that point.
Well, we actually heard that it was changed quite drastically from the original plan.
Ken Scissors.
Ken Scissors was telling us that it was the original plan was a lot more workable than what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He said it was just a bike lane was all that they had proposed in the bike and ped plan, or pedestrian and
And didn't they
bike
say
lane.
something about speed bumps or something of that kind?
Sure.
But as a matter, it was Cody Kennedy we were talking to, I believe, who said, very inexpensive, and I've said this probably a dozen times in different Facebook posts or whatever. You take your crosswalks, you make a speed, hump out of them or a speed bump out of them. That's going to slow down people whether they want to or not. They'll find out real quick if they don't observe it. If you did that in conjunction with speed limit signs, you're not going to have the problem that you had before. And if the true goal, kind of like you were saying, if the true goal is to make it safer, if the true goal is to slow people down, which I can affirm that position, then that's a very inexpensive. Let's start out with a cheaper pilot program like that. Doing something, that's full measure like they did. And they were good enough to come down and talk to us when we voiced our concerns and all of that. But when you combine a lot of those changes in conjunction with a lot of the changes to the parking that we've seen, a lot of the feedback that I've gotten is I don't bother going downtown because it's way easier just to park somewhere else. And it's become more of a parking issue and a figuring out where to go issue, and the bollards all over the place issue. And the goal isn't hopefully to eliminate people from downtown,
Right.
It's to make it safer, which again I firmly believe that would be a good thing. Doesn't feel safer though.
No. Well, and I know for us, we were talking to Jody, who has the day center, and she said, and people are really aggressive when you're trying to parallel park. It's like the minute they see you thinking about parallel parking, they're just right up there, and if you don't parallel park very well, like I don't, and I'm 4 feet away from the curb by the time I've maneuvered back and forth, and I'm going, okay, I can't stay here. Somebody's going to give me a ticket because I'm out in the middle of the street.
Or
Perfectly
take your
parallel
door off
parks,
for you.
but
And let me tell you, if your tires on one of those lines, they will give you a ticket.
yeah.
I have heard that they're going to go back to a little bit more of the angled parking, which is great. It makes, it makes a little more sense than the murals to have the angled parking. You'll get just as many spots, and if not more.
I think you can see better to back up and get out too than you can. For whatever reason, parallel parking just doesn't give you a good view of what's going on.
Drive down Colorado to the east,
Yeah.
and when you hit 5th, okay, you're taking your life in your own hands, because those cars coming on 5th Street up, you can't see them.
You can't see them. That's right.
And so
That's exactly right.
it's kind of like
You
Russian
can't
roulette.
on 4th either. If you're coming down 4th going towards the freeway,
But
you
that's
can't see.
but they chose parking spaces over safety in a safety program. That doesn't make sense to me.
No.
You can't see around the corners. You have to stick your head out there before you can see if there's traffic coming, and then you're already in the way.
Well, but the parallel parking pulls you right up there to where you can't see around unless you pull out. And, you know, I mean, the parking, you're parked right there and the street's right here. You have to pull out in order to see around it. So it's not safe.
Well, and then you've got the parking meters on top of that, increasing the cost of parking downtown. And when they wanted to do it for a longer period of time, even Alexis, when she was on the other day, she said they don't feel safe oftentimes getting off later at night to, get to your car to get to the 10-hour parking places because they're farther away. And, I'm not sure that people just come down and park all day the way it was before. And that's part of my issue with the whole thing is you've been here for a long time. I mean, honestly, were you ever thinking it was that unsafe before they made the changes?
No,
I mean, was it a
safety.
concern?
No, and look, we've been in operation for 30 years, and I've been there for 11 of those 30 years, and we have yet to have any unsafe environment in the area. Even with the homeless and those kind of even no parking problems, no street problems. You could see clearly across. So no, it's definitely not safer now.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't think that there was a need really to make any changes to the street before?
Well, look, I get that the speed was an issue before, and so I was completely comfortable with them slowing it down.
It's just how they
don't
put
think
it
that
on.
was a problem at all. I think actually that was a wonderful idea to slow traffic down to keep it a little bit safer. But the way we went about it, or the plans that we implemented, didn't achieve that to the level that everyone expected.
Right.
I think it could have been done a lot easier and a lot cheaper. I think that we don't need a bike path on every street downtown. There's just not that many bikes yet, and I get building for the future. But currently, it's riding downtown isn't safe because they can't clean the streets in the bike lanes because of all the poles. And if you're a bike rider, you know that pebbles and riding bikes don't
mix.
meet up to safety. And then you were riding on the inside. Bikers are usually used to riding in traffic, so now when you're on the other side of it and a door opens up, you have more safety concerns. My wife is an avid bike rider. She does 100-mile runs and rides 5 days a week in the summer if she can. And she refuses to ride the bike downtown because it's not safe.
One thing that I find interesting is you've got Main Street, and all down Main Street, if you notice, they've got the little person on the bike and the arrow, because the people riding a bike are flowing with traffic. Observe the rules just as if you were a car down Main Street. And so I wonder if we do that on Main Street, same speed limit, why wouldn't something like that be considered on 4th, 5th, 6th, and all of that? Observe it just the same as you would on Main Street there. And we don't have a separate bike lane. The whole thing is open to bikes on Main Street. With the bike lanes in, I couldn't tell you how many times I've had somebody zip right in front of me without looking and almost hit them, coming down 4th or 5th or whatever on it. Just doesn't make sense. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, even if they left everything the way it was with the streets, what they've done with the parking, and you look at a big empty parking lot in the middle of the day, between 4th and 5th, between Maine and Colorado, you've got 25% at best occupancy in that parking lot. I'd rather see it misused but completely used and full than being used in this new kiosk system where everybody's got to go down to Colorado and go in and find a kiosk. How much revenue are they losing, by having those kiosks in there in the one entrance with that parking lot sitting empty? And so it doesn't resonate with me. The reason why you're charging for parking is to pay for the meter maids and the painting of the parking lot and the streets and maintenance of it. It's not a huge profit center, I wouldn't imagine.
That's what they used to say. That's not true with the increase. Now it does generate revenue according to them, because you're right, the old parking meters, they said, well, we just have those to maintain, like you said, the meter maid.
It doesn't generate any revenue when it's sitting empty.
You're right.
Well,
that's just a fact.
The fees have doubled. It's to park in that parking lot that we're discussing. It's $9.40 something a day.
Ouch.
So
that makes it a little difficult for the people.
But the city's plan was they wanted turnover parking. They want to encourage that you can only be there for a few hours. They're trying to get turnover parking.
And does that really, you two as business people, does that make sense? Was that a problem before, that people were just sitting there and others were not coming to the restaurant because they said, well, gee, those people are parked there all day, so I can't.
No,
I can't find a spot.
I mean, I can understand the double-edged sword. If you have all the employees and some of them are speaking as if the employees are the bad guys. If all the employees are taking up the parking spots, then there's no room for customers to come in. But right now, the employees yes, it's only $9 a day, but $9 for you and me might be very different than $9 for somebody else.
Right.
That's a huge thing. If you're working, 5 days a week, that's $200 a month. That's a big deal for people just to park. And so, if the parking lot is full, you're generating money. If it's not full, you're not generating money, and the employees are struggling, so they have to park blocks away. The idea of not having employees park in those lots so that customers can be there is clearly not working, because the parking lots aren't full of customers.
Right.
They're empty.
Right.
And so it just, I don't understand it. And another thing, I know how expensive parking meters are. I looked into it. I've got a parking lot. They're not cheap. What the heck happened to all the meters that were there? And now we've gone to a kiosk system where there's 3 or 4 of them in that lot that you've got to, again, more hassle. Park, go find the kiosk, remember what number you had, and come back. What happened to all the meters that were there? And how many years is it going to take to outrun the expense of buying those, getting rid of all of those, now buying the kiosks? You could have paid for a second level on the parking deck. With all of that money. And so I'm just not understanding some of it. And you're never going to please everybody all the time. You're never going to, the people that are riding the bikes or the people that want to park their cars. And I get that there's going to be variances of opinion. And I'm not one of those, no change, ever. You have to evolve. And I can understand why they want to look at these things from time to time, but if the end goal is to generate revenue from parking and bring people downtown, this doesn't seem like the right direction.
Well, and part of it is too, I think the whole concept and mindset behind that a parking spot is going to generate more money than the sales taxes out of those businesses, I think is skewed.
I agree.
The dollars that are produced out of sales tax out of each of those business outweighs that profit you're arriving in from a parking space. So I think you're just trading locations of that money direction. We want this department to show that it's making money, But what happens to the sales taxes when businesses go under and those kind of things? We're a 30-year-old business contributing to sales tax for each and every day of those 30 years.
Exactly. And I was one of those customers that came down and did that. I haven't been to Main Street other than on Sunday mornings to go to the post office when nobody's around since they put the bollards up.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, there should not, if the city has enough individuals boycotting an area because of the actions that they have taken, that's wrong. And they should review it and take a look at it instead of doubling down. I don't think the city should have an extra slush fund of what they consider disposable income that we can waste on tent covers or parking meters that we use for a year, or let's think long term. I don't know how many times they've put out bids for surveys or information on an area that they're getting already feedback from the city's population.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're already telling you what we want, but there are certain people in city council that think they know better than the people that are living here.
Mm-hmm.
Now they might, but is really they might not. Obviously, they've had some wins and they've had some failures. So isn't that just like everybody else's opinion that puts into the subject that we're talking about?
Well, and that's what makes the change happen is that you try something, it doesn't work, you back off and you go somewhere else. I mean, it just
But
makes...
they're not. They're doubling down on the
Right.
streets that
Right.
everybody's having problems with, and now not only on top of now we're going to do it to 7th, which is the most beautiful street that we have in this town. Gunnison and 7th, those two streets are just amazingly beautiful and have brought culture to this town since I was in my youth. I don't see a need for that to go away because someone has an agenda or there's some popular... I can jump on the popular word bandwagon of what that means to... The proof's in the pudding.
And I have to disagree with you on boycott word. I don't think we're boycotting when we're not coming down. It's just we're afraid to come down.
That's right.
And it's not because of the transients or anything else. It's because we might get in an accident.
Yeah.
I've actually seen the word used, boycott, and so I'm going to affirm what he said, in different online forums. And it may not be an organized effort, but there are people, I simply won't go downtown because of this.
Right.
And used incorrectly or not, I want to interject that. One of the ideas that we had come up with that makes total sense to me, especially if it's a revenue thing, you look at takeout, you look at your DoorDash and stuff like that. I would be willing to lease a space now that we have extra spaces that's exclusive to where we could have somebody, for that takeout. But, at present, us and probably most of the restaurants downtown, there isn't really an option for that. It's kind of catch as catch can, and they might get a spot or not. And so that element of our business is essentially non-existent. And we understand, just giving us a spot for free, they're losing out on potential revenue, but, even presenting it as, hey, one of these spaces, if we can designate, we will advance you all of the revenue that you would have generated from that. And, that never gained any traction because the answer was, well, then we'd have to do that for everyone. And I say, then great.
And
do that for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
And
I don't
again,
know
it goes back to your idea that you're generating more sales tax if you have people.
But those increased parking spaces that they can now advertise is a cornerstone they're working on. Look what I brought you, more parking spaces. But if they're unsafe, some of the parking spaces they added were north of Grand that were for homes that didn't have parking spaces ever. So if you're a few of those, I've got a parking space now. I don't ever want it to go away.
Right.
But so we've set a precedent. And how do you back out of those?
Well, that was real interesting to me. Is I don't know if you were there when Greg Palmer came in to talk about 4th and 5th, and he had been on city council, in fact, the mayor, when they decided to do the back-end parking on 7th. And he said, when we thought of it, it wasn't a bad thought. I mean, we thought, well, if people backed in, then they could put their packages in the back. You'd have your trunk right there. And he said, and it didn't work. So we said, never mind. We'll just go back.
It didn't
to how
last
it
that
was
long
before.
either.
No, because people said, we don't like this. We don't want this. And instead of saying, we know what's best for the community, the city council, they said, we represent the community. And if who we represent doesn't want what we're doing, we need to say that's what you want.
And isn't that what you expect or desire out of a city council?
Absolutely.
That will look through what's going on and pick the direction that's best for everyone. It seems now that there's a wall thrown up, and we'll do whatever our agenda says we want to do. And you're going to have to live with it.
Go on to Engage DJ, and look at the survey.
Right.
This is, for them to gather community feedback.
Right.
And then they gaslight you and tell you that's really, there's people that are for it, people that are against, and you're like,
It looks to me like 80% of the people are against it.
Right.
And we don't like this, and we're not going to travel that route anymore.
Well, when you look at it, when they did the first redo of Main Street in 62, yes, that was a huge deal because it did take business away from people for a while. But it also, in turn, was something that everybody worked for in collective. It wasn't.
well, it was 75% funded by the businesses.
Yes,
so that
by
makes
the
a
businesses.
huge
So
difference if you're
it
saying,
was a difference.
we want to change this for us to make
Yeah.
it
Right.
better. And it
And
wasn't
not
like you couldn't
being
do
changed
downtown.
for you, but being changed with your consent.
And by
Well, it's a
just
longer term investment,
Yes.
There's always going to be pain with change, even good change.
Absolutely.
And so, I understand, any disruption of anything, there's going to be somebody up in arms, and that's not the idea. And it's not a position I would ever want to find myself sitting on city council. And so I give those folks a lot of grace for what they do and a lot of appreciation for what they do. Even the ones on the wrong side of my agenda, doing what they do is a big deal. Equal parts representation, and at some point they have to make some hard decisions. I get that, but when it feels like an organized effort to dismiss the opinion of the constituents as opposed to, let's gather it in and we need to make a hard decision on something, that's what starts to not resonate with me.
So how has that impacted you, the changes that they've made to, the parking, to having the homeless day center down there, the resource center, and the 4th and 5th? How has that bottom line affected you?
As you would think, it has hit us financially. Let's just say that the sales are down, and we're in tough times. We're in an industry that the cost of food is very important to us. So this isn't the only thing that's hitting the bottom line, but there's a difference between bottom line numbers and overall sales numbers. I get that our bottom line number will always have to be a work in progress.
Of course.
But the sales should stay steady or increase with the population.
Exactly.
And we're not seeing that, and we think some of it, not all of it, but some of it has to do with our downtown situation.
Well, people are still spending money at restaurants.
Uh,
You see that all the time. And it doesn't
Absolutely.
make any difference if the prices go up. That's what we want. So they do. But when you have to be stuck with not only that, but the other as well, it just makes almost a lethal combination for you.
And and I don't think these changes are going to put any business out of business. I don't think they're dramatic enough to where it is a do or die, make or break. But it certainly doesn't make it easier. It certainly doesn't seem conducive to growth, what you would like to see. we want to evolve just like the city does. We're talking about introducing breakfast, and so
I saw that.
maybe Sundays.
Sunday brunch.
So there's some things like that. We can adapt like anybody else. Any business that's been there, and even though I haven't been there for 30 years, we're going to be in a position to where you have to over time.
Right.
We're at peace with that, but adding things unnecessarily to the normal stresses of business ownership, let alone restaurant management and ownership, is it is tough to take when it doesn't feel like you're as heard as you'd like to be.
And you're in a unique situation because people like to go out and eat. They don't necessarily want to go downtown to fight all of that with the boutique shops that there are downtown. I have an eyeglasses place downtown on 4th and Main. It's hard to get to. I haven't been back since they started all of this, and I need to. I hate to change because they know me. So where are you? It's that be damned if you do, be damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So do you think that City Council then is willing to make changes, or do you think that it's going to take an election to let them know that you cannot continue in this vein and expect people to just go along with it? Do you think that it's very disruptive to, the city or the downtown, or do you think that it'll blow over and people will be fine with it?
Honestly, I think it's going to take a referendum to really illustrate the will of the people. I think it's going to take something like that. I don't think that there's a magic wand to change somebody's opinion if there's an agenda. And the ones that love the change to the streets are probably still going to love it no matter what you present, and the ones that don't like it are probably still going to not like it. And that's on council or with constituents and patrons and all that. You either do or you don't, and I don't think you grow to love something that you don't in that regard. And so I think as far as council goes, maybe it does take an election to realize some of that change. And that's true everywhere, whether you're talking national, state, or local like this. But there are some opportunities, to present ideas if somebody's willing to listen, and if they're not willing to listen, then it's going to take another set of years, to get something to happen.
Yeah,
Definitely. Do you think that it would help if they had publicized those changes a little bit more and got more input? Because what we found was that not many people knew that it was going to happen when it did. And it blindsided everybody. Well, that automatically makes you mad. You don't want to be blindsided. You want to be a part of it. You want to feel a part of your community.
I'm going to give them a little bit of grace on this here. You can read a book about riding a bike, and I'm going to use in that all you want to, but until you get on the bike, you don't know how good at it you are. And you're going to find out the hard way that it may or may not be a thing.
Pilot project then.
There you go.
Okay.
But once you figure out, it hurts when you fall off the bike and scrape your knees, you're going to adapt, and you're going to put knee pads on, and you're going to maybe read the book a little harder next time. And things like that. I think you have to be willing to adapt and understand that your pilot is not necessarily the final thing. There's been adjustments, and I give them some credit to the, at least making some adjustments, but they were obvious and necessary because somebody was going to get killed. It's still bad, a couple of those intersections is pretty precarious. And so I think there's further changes needed. Does it have to go back exactly the way that it was before? Not necessarily. I'm willing to. I'm pretty sure pretty much of the circles you run are willing to at least entertain a discussion, about that stuff.
But in the meantime, wouldn't you put it back to what it was and then start from square one and say, look, this didn't work. What can we do to make it work? I mean, I'm not opposed to change either, but it has to make sense.
Yeah, I think some of this pushback is finally getting to some ears. They have made 4 or 5 adjustments to what they've done in the process. The problem is for me is that if it's in someone's agenda, they're going to find some way to make that agenda happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can listen to what the people's input is and find out what their needs are and then adapt to what those are. And if your agenda doesn't meet what the people are asking for, then maybe you should come off your agenda a little bit. But I think we have people that are in power that don't want to come off their agenda. I think it's okay for some of those to spend the city's money by taking a stab at their agenda instead of walking through, listening, and holding back until you can make the right call. There's just been so many wasteful projects. We purchased a tent that was in the millions that we then disposed of. Like Trout was talking about the parking meters, where did they go? Are they going to use? Do we need a survey to find out what to name our rec center? These seems all to be dollars that we don't have to spend. We've spent a lot of money on downtown park to make it I keep driving by and I have yet to see someone there. It's still not a safe area. We just did it. The agenda was to push the homeless out. It was, and instead of working through that problem, we just spent a bunch of money on it to make it go away.
Right.
And it didn't go away.
And it didn't go away.
It just moved it.
It's just moved it a little bit. And so it's really walking through those scenarios to find out, are we going to get the bang for our buck? Or is this just going down the rabbit hole?
Right.
How about the 5th Street bathroom?
Yeah.
You know, you talk about that. I don't know how many times I've driven past that and seen closed due to vandalism on the supposed vandalism-proof bathroom, you know, that they have there, and it's still a micro encampment most of the time around that bathroom. I don't understand that whole project. You know, I understand there was a problem before, but it seems about equal the problem at that great expense. And again, you know, it's not my budget. I'm not there making decisions, but I should be in some small way a tiny part of those decisions, you know, by having that opinion asked. And
Right.
It's very disheartening, you know, to me, having to make that corner anyway, and I can't pull out onto 5th Street when I'm coming out of that parking lot, number one. But two, as I'm trying to round the corner and be careful, I'm looking at that, you know, $1 million probably bathroom sitting there, and there's a couple of Walmart carts and people there, and it's been vandalized, and there's a sign closed due to vandalism. Is just, we got to be good stewards of our money, and there needs to be some public scrutiny or accountability, and those budget decisions should be able to stand up to that scrutiny.
And I think that that's a real tough thing, because we did have Alexis on the other day. She was right before you guys, and you know, she's running against Cody, and I said, so have you looked at the budget? And she said, well, briefly. And I said, well, what did you think? Well, I have to look at it some more. Well, people should be able to look at the budget and say, this is where money's being spent, is the money, and everybody should be able to look at that budget and be able to understand. And they say, well, you know, it's very complicated because you make it so.
Yeah, absolutely. You can make it complicated. I think we're finding out how that's happened throughout our country with Doge.
Exactly.
The idea is to make it complicated so you can't see what I'm doing, when it should be transparent as possible. That should be the vision.
Right.
But again, if you have an agenda and you don't want the public to really see it, then you have to put up all those little barriers so it's not obvious to everyone.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you, and we do, I mean, honestly, we think that the safety agenda, like you say, is not really the agenda of the whole, of the changes that we're seeing and the money that's being spent. You know, sometimes it was funny when we had Dennis Simpson on, you know, a lot of people think he's just a curmudgeon, but he's an accountant. And he said, my whole reason for running was transparency. So he always says, how does that, I want to see the budget. I want to see where this fits in.
Sure.
And a lot of times he says, no. You know, and if we're going to run in a deficit, which is what they're predicting for the next 4 or 5 years, he said maybe an idea would be to quit spending so much money.
I have to at my house.
Yeah.
When the electric bills and the eggs and all those kind of things, I have to make adjustments. And I don't necessarily charge someone coming down the street by my house to get some extra dollars from them because I'm in a pickle.
Right. Right.
About 10 years ago, I served on a budget committee for the school district. I did not sign an NDA, so I can talk freely about it. And they had a bunch of ideas. How can we save money and everything? And one of the things that I had brought up, I said, you know, Google for Classrooms is free right now, you know, the district. And I asked the finance person at the time, you know, what are we spending on laptops and all of this for kids? And the lease from Dell, she said it was about $1 million. I said, oh, $1 million. And what is that deficit? $13 million was the deficit, or something akin to that at the time. And so my suggestion was, well, why don't we go to something that's free? Costs nothing. Well, the standard is Microsoft, and it comes with tech support, and so we would have to hire people to do the tech support. And I thought, you know, for $1 million a year, you could hire a lot of people to be tech support, you know, around the district. And the response that I got was, we need to save 13. We don't have time to save just one. And that stuck with me over the years, that, you know, that's some of the mentality out there is, well, this is just little stuff. We're focused on big millions. This is just $1 million, you know, on a pilot project or whatever it happens to be. And, you know, all those little things do add up to big things. And, you know, if you don't have enough money in the bank account to pay your bills, you got to figure out which ones you're not going to pay, and do you eat this month and not. You know, that's everybody's household. You know, why shouldn't we or couldn't we do that with large organizations and government organizations, city, state, you know, whatever? There should be that budget analysis. And I'm sorry, math is hard. Yes, I get it. But it's always right. And if you put all of the dollars and cents down, and you see a negative there at the end, you got to cut something out, or you're going to be in the red.
That's exactly right, and you're going to lose.
Sure. Or you add taxes, or, sorry, the new word is fees.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
We don't call them taxes anymore because, and that's all the wordplay that happens. I'm just going to call it something else, so you think it's something different when it's the exact same thing.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of that going on in our country right now.
There is indeed.
Well, even in just a sideline on when they made the changes, because a lot of what we're seeing, I believe, comes out of the sustainability and adaptation plan, and the idea that because of climate change, we have to make sure that we're being kinder to the planet, and so we want people to ride their bikes more, so we ride a scooter, and whatever you're doing. But one of the things that they did was for the recycling and stuff. We had the recycling business that was in Grand Junction, and then we said, well, if you will get these trash cans, and we'll make sure more people are recycling, and we'll make it cheaper for you on your bill if you get more trash cans. And what I've noticed is every single month, my sewer and trash goes up. And I'm going, well, initially it was cheaper, but nobody could think, if you're running multiple trucks, to do that instead of the one truck that they had and people paid for, that it's going to be cheaper.
I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
I don't think anybody sought out, you know, how can we drive this city into the dirt?
Right,
You know,
I don't either.
No, that
I
was
don't
not
think
the
so.
agenda.
You know,
I'm sure.
100% don't think that's the case on any level of government. But that being said, you know, it is a slippery slope when you start looking at the different initiatives and stuff. you've got a variance of opinion how to handle it. What is the best way to do this? And if you come in with that preconceived notion, here's how I want to see it. Now, I can tell you, hunt and fish and, all the stuff outdoors and all of that. If I see trash in the woods, I'm going to pick it up. And I firmly believe in a lot of the conservation efforts and stuff. Very, very worthy and righteous endeavors. And I think most people feel the same way. At the cost of, all of the recycling stuff and really pushing that, how good is it? And I read this one article about the different plastics. The process to take the plastics and put them through that recycling, what it does to the environment and the gases it releases to go through that process is actually equally, if not more harmful in some cases, than just having the plastics out there. And so sometimes the cure is worse than the disease.
Right.
And, if that's the problem, come up with a new container or something. I don't know. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Put ingenuity to work and still be good stewards.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's just it. Understand, for years now, we've tried to get rid of plastic straws because that was in the mind of everybody. That's what the most damage was from. Yet we still get our milk in a plastic jug. It's just, we just try to say, I just care enough. I just care enough to get the surface of the problem. I can't really fix it. So I just want to
Look like I'm
Look
doing
like I
something.
care.
You
So
want to
that's
earn your
what's going
America.
on downtown
Yeah.
with the bollards and the paint.
Instead
Same
of
thing.
instead of diving in and go, okay, we all know that plastics are a problem, but let's not just get rid of the straws. Let's work on the big picture. You can't just take I'm gonna work on this small percentage and then I'm gonna hang my hat on that and say, look what I did.
Well, it comes back to when they decided that we couldn't have plastic bags at the grocery store anymore. I think they were the group that changed from paper, because we used to have paper bags, to plastic.
Sure.
And Kent
Now we're-
Harbert always
because-
said, it's a renewable resource. Why is everybody so upset about us cutting down trees? Because we can plant more. And it's good for the environment, and it's a good industry.
Well, and the logging environment is adapted. They don't just clear cut and leave it like they
Right.
did years and years ago. They've done a lot to sustain those forests, and they took that industry and made something better out of what it was. Preserving that resource, and quite honestly, they're healthier now because a lot of that logging, and they do the systematic, just not the clear cut, but selective.
Selective
Right.
cutting.
When they're doing stuff like that. And I think in almost anything you do, you don't have to go in full measure. You can do it, incrementally, and adapt and learn better ways to do it.
But where I was going on the plastic bags is that it's another fee too, because when they changed it, started charging you 10 cents, well then you had to change all the cash registers to be able to adopt that. And what is it, 4 cents goes to Governor Polis? The grocery store gets some, but then
Sure.
Governor Polis gets some, and I'm like, it's a fee.
Sure, it's a fee. We didn't just give away paper bags. We've tried to incorporate people to just taking their groceries in nothing and put them in your car, because that's the least waste.
Right.
So it's really what the key word of the day is. And that's kind of, we've seen that come full circle from paper to plastic back to paper. And that was there the whole time.
Right.
That was there the whole time.
Just a new idea. Well, we've covered a whole bunch of topics. Is there, and we've complained. Is there anything that you two would like to share about, the direction? We would say, I know that you're probably not. I know you did in the paper say that you endorsed the 3 candidates that you feel have common sense. And I don't know if you feel comfortable saying that here, but we, just in looking at the city does need to listen. That I think is the biggest thing, and I think it's which candidates are going to come back and say we need to be transparent and we need to listen.
Yeah,
And we
regardless
need to
of
use common
change, which
sense.
change is inevitable, they do need to listen.
Yeah, listen and be informed. And I really encourage everyone out there to get yourself informed and then go out and vote.
Right. Right. Anything else you guys want to cover? Anything?
Honestly, my endorsement was to kind of like you were just saying, vote for those who are going to listen to you. Vote for those that will represent you accordingly. And I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote, but those happen to be the candidates that showed a genuine interest in my interests, and the interest of their constituents. And, I don't take something like that lightly. I typically have not done that, but, this directly affecting me. Being on Grand, I've got a building on 7th, and, 4th and Main is the epicenter, for the Ballard situation. I thought I would do that. So.
Well, no, I think it's been, I know for myself, Cody, I think just being there Tuesday and Thursdays at the coffee shop and saying, come in, talk to me. And I know he has gone to all the businesses and talked to them and said, what do you think? How's this working for you?
Yeah, absolutely he has. And the others have not wanted to listen. There's some directions that we've gone with parking and throughout the city that I've been told we're not going to talk to you. So there is a commitment to not sharing information or even listening at times.
And I just have one last question. I know that the Downtown Development Authority has a big impact on your businesses because there is a special tax for them. Do you feel like the Downtown Development Authority is listening and trying to advocate for the businesses downtown, or do you feel like it's more in whatever the city wants to do, that's going to be the direction that they want to take?
I can tell you personally, for me, I've had very good and thoughtful conversations with Brandon. It's Brandon, right?
Brandon Cloud.
Yeah.
Brandon Stram.
Yeah. Very good. And whether we've agreed on everything or not, he's been very, very open to conversation and seemed genuinely interested in concerns that I've had. And so, I don't know.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
He's lent an ear every time we want. I just don't know if how that second conversation's being heard or being passed on or so on and so forth. So,
or if what he says falls on deaf ears,
Yeah,
who knows?
Right. Well, it's one thing that you wonder because that would be a voice of a number of people. And we have friends that have businesses downtown, and they said, we're not even willing to say anything. We don't want to alienate anybody, so we don't like it, but we're not going to say anything out loud.
Sure.
And I think that is, again, not being very representative. No.
But there's been some people that absolutely will listen. And I've got some people that absolutely won't listen. So I think there's a combination of a little bit of what's going on in our local government, and hopefully we can let everyone know that's not listening to, it would be in everybody's best benefit if they did listen to it.
Right.
Or at least to be able to adapt their agenda to the popularity of what other opinions being said.
Or see if there's something that can achieve that same agenda that helps everybody instead of saying, well, we're going to make winners and losers here.
Sure.
Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we see them, the truth as we know it. You decide. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much
Yes,
for
Appreciate
joining
your
us.
time.
I won't say
Appreciate it.
guys, gentlemen.
Well, thank